Mike Woodson and the Indiana Hoosiers have done it again. They add Langdon Hatton through the transfer portal.
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in. It is the Locked On Hoosiers podcast. I'm your man, Jacob Goins. I appreciate you being here, making this your first listen each and every day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Well, we've been waiting for another addition through the transfer portal for Indiana basketball, and it finally happened late Wednesday night, and then it was confirmed on Thursday morning. Langdon Hatton has committed to the Indiana Hoosiers. The 6'10" forward is going to be playing in Bloomington next season. Not only did he commit during his official visit, he is then signed as of Thursday morning. So the Hoosiers add one, and in today's world where, it's not official until it's official, it is now official for the Hoosiers. Langdon Hatton will be playing for Indiana. He is a 6'10" big man, as they call him. He is the coming in the fifth now portal addition for Indiana from Bellarmine. He played 64 games. In 37 of those, he started. Averaged 7 points, 4.5 rebounds, and just over 20 minutes a game. His shooting stats: 50% from the field, 34% from three, and 63% at the free throw line. Now, his last year as a junior, he averaged over 10 points a game, 7 rebounds, an assist, a block. Good, right? And then shooting, he shot 48% from the field, 38% 33% from three, and 67.5% at the free throw line. So he's got height, he's got scoring, he's got defense, and overall, he brings you depth if you're Indiana and Mike Woodson. And look, it's been a while since we got one, since we had the flurry of players from Ballo to Rice to Carlyle to Goode. We've been waiting on, we need some more height and we need depth at that position as well. And the Hoosiers finally got it. Langdon Hatton's going to come in for this team, and he's not going to start. He's not going to play 30-plus minutes a game. But what he will do, coming from Bellarmine, is he'll appreciate an opportunity to play here in his home state of Indiana. And he's going to bring you something that you did not have a whole lot of last year, which is depth. You're going to have somebody that you can go to the bench and say, we need you to hold down the fort. We need you to be ready when your name and number is called. I think he's going to be that for this Indiana team and for Mike Woodson, because we kind of know, well, not even kind of, we know what the starting five is going to look like, and we especially know the big guys down low. Oumar Ballo at the 5, Myles Rice at the 4, and Mackenzie Mbako at the 3. Langdon Hatton's a guy at 6'10" that is able to score, but can also play defense because he's lengthy. You can kind of float him around in there a little bit if you need to. Good thing is you do have Luke Goode, who I think will be a backup 3, could float down if he needed to, but now you have Hatton as well. So you've got more size to back up Oumar Ballo and Myles Rice, because as I've told you, believe it or not, those guys can't play the entire game every single night, and they're not going to. That's something that people have actually talked about Oumar Ballo, because they said that down the stretch, at times, he was looking tired when he was at Arizona. Hopefully we can get that kind of worked out of him and get maybe better shape or whatever the case may be. We can't have that happening. But when he does sit down, when he does take a break, same thing for Myles Rice. You want to have players that you can trust and that you can put into the basketball game. I like this kid a lot. I really, really do. I think his numbers are solid. Nothing that's going to say, whoa, and just jump off the page. But I really do think he's going to be a really good player. And this is a solid addition through the transfer portal in an era where it's so hard to find bench players and convince them that being a bench player here is okay. It's tough to do that nowadays. And the Hoosiers have done it with Langdon Hatton, who I think probably understood, okay, I'm not going to be a starter most likely at most places. Could he have been? Maybe somewhere, but he was going to have to look around. But the Hoosiers said, here's your role. Here's what you're going to do. And here's what we can do for you. And they came to an agreement, and turns out they liked it. And he's going to come in and just elevate the roster. He's a better bench player than most of the guys we had off the bench last year because they all left. You're gone, right? They don't exist here anymore. Indiana had to go and find some guys. This is a big win. This is a huge win for the Indiana Hoosiers, who needed a guy like him. Versatile player. I think he's a good defender. I think his shooting can definitely improve, especially from outside the painted area, maybe 18-foot mid-range jumpers, those three-point shots as well. Would like to see the free throws be a little bit better, but you start talking about big guys and 60 to 65, and flirting with 70 is just fine. That'll get the job done more times than not. You just want to make sure that he's not a liability off the bench, and I don't think he will be. But I think the Indiana Hoosiers had that. I think we did have that last year where you go to the bench and you're just praying and counting down the seconds until the guys come back in. The starters, that is, would come back onto the floor. That's not the case right now and we're going to look at the roster later on in the show today, but when you talk about Trey Galloway, Luke Goode, Langdon Hatton, other guys that Indiana could use, you're doing just fine. Like, you are okay in terms of your bench. You've gone and gotten guys that you had to have to start and now to come off the bench as well. I like Langdon Hatton. I think it's a lot of fun. He is an Indiana kid, so it just makes sense. He's from the state, and I like the fact that he was able to come on his visit, enjoyed it enough, was able to commit, and boom, signed the papers right then and there this morning on a Thursday and got this thing locked down. That's what you're supposed to do. The Indiana Hoosiers get another portal addition from Langdon Hatton. The Bellarmine 6'10" forward is coming to Indiana. Well, coming up on Locked On Hoosiers, we'll hear what Mike Woodson had to say about Langdon Hatton, his comments about the 6'10" transfer, and what he can bring to this roster, which we will then look at later on in the show as well. All that coming up on Locked On Hoosiers. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by FanDuel. It's winner-take-all time in the NBA and NHL. As I mean, you've got the second-round games and series starting to wrap up. Conference finals are about to be set in the NBA and in the NHL. It's getting down to some really exciting times in both of those playoffs, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and much more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back into Locked On Hoosiers. Appreciate you being here, making this your first listen each and every day. Shout out to all my everydayers, the reason that we do this here at the Locked On Podcast Network. So thank you so much. To all of my audio listeners, be sure you follow us on there, send it to everybody you know, and be sure you turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode of Locked On Hoosiers. And for all my video people on YouTube, thank you so much for watching. Like this video, and make sure you subscribe to the channel. We're past 2,500. We're heading towards 3,000. So thank you so much, and for making this your first listen each and every day. Indiana picks up the commit of Langdon Hatton, the Bellarmine transfer, a guy that has been talked about for a while, finally got to take a visit here and liked it so much that he committed and he signed. Not only did he like Indiana, Indiana liked him too. And here's some things that Mike Woodson had to say about the kid. And this kind of tells you everything you need to know. Quote from Mike Woodson: Langdon is an experienced, versatile big man that will help us with our front court depth. He goes on to say he is a big body that can work in the post, get after the glass, and step out to knock down a shot. He is an Indiana kid that plays the right way, and we are excited to bring him home to the Hoosier State. And yeah, the guy can rebound. I mean, he averaged over almost 5 rebounds during his career. And I think in last year as a junior, averaged 7 rebounds a game. Like, you're talking about a guy that was flirting with a walking double-double, 10.7 rebounds. That's awesome. That's fantastic. If you could get anything close to that coming off the bench, you're in real business here if you're Indiana, because his minutes will be limited, but the minutes that he plays are going to be very important. Talked about the depth and what happens when Ballo and Renew have to sit. God forbid this, but what happens if they get hurt? What happens if they go down and they can't come back for a while? We saw Khalil Ware and Malik Renew battle injuries all season long a year ago, and the problem was Peyton Sparks was the answer. That was the result. That's who you had to put in, and no offense to him, but that just wasn't getting it done for Indiana. You now have guys like Hatton who come in and can be a starter if they have to be. If you need that from them, boom, you got it. Somebody gets a stomach bug. All right, cool. Langdon's in. Good deal. You've got that in your back pocket now. Don't want that to happen. And again, we are very hopeful that it doesn't, but it does happen at times. And so you have to be ready for that. And the Indiana Hoosiers are. And from what Mike Woodson said, he talked about the depth, talked about his work in the post, which I think is going to be very good offensively and defensively. Not enough people are talking about his defense, and most of his highlights are on the offensive side, but he's just a big body. He's 6'10". His wingspan's bigger than that. Like, he is a presence in the lane. And I talk about it all the time. All you got to be is just be big, right? Like you're getting attacked by a bear. Just be big and try to scare them away. And talking about who you scare away, it's the guards that get into the lane, because you are going to see some in the Big Ten. There is no doubt about it. You will see some very skilled, experienced, talented guards in the Big Ten Conference this season in college basketball. You've got to have your presence in there and be able to defend without fouling, something that, shoot, Malik Renew still got to figure out how to defend without fouling. And if those things come together, your front court's going to be really, really talented. And I think the Hoosiers are right now flirting with a top 2 or 3 front court in the Big Ten. I think that's what they're pushing for right now. And you can make an argument there about where they would fall. But, man, this is a good team. And Hatton, if he can start to shoot the ball a little bit better and more effectively, that 1 for 3 that we talk about, right? With the big men, just make one. Just make one. If you make one in a game, they have to respect it, and they will. They're not going to let you stand out there and shoot all night long in the defense of not letting you just get hot and knock down 3 after 3 after 3. That will open the floor, and then boom, now you've got some options. Now what's important now is to get Hatton in here, start working out with everybody, and that's another big piece of this too. And we'll talk about that when looking at the roster here in a little bit. This team has to come together, and they've got to gel. There's so many new names and new faces on this team. Sure, you bring back some big names, but you also are going to have, 3 of your 5 starters are brand new, plus 2 of your role players off the bench are going to be brand new as well. Like, that is a lot to mold together, and it takes time. It takes actual games. And so what I'm saying is, in November, when this team starts playing games and you go to the Battle of Atlantis, which there was a change in that, by the way, Creighton no longer playing in it. I'm not sure. I think they're playing in a different tournament now. I believe they're going to some tournament in Las Vegas where the NIL stuff is going on. I won't get into all that right now. But when Indiana goes to the Battle for Atlantis, it's not going to be great. It's not going to be perfect. They have a good chance to win it, I think. But that's a good time for everything to kind of work the kinks out, if you will. It's like, okay, this isn't working. We got to find a way to do this. Here's how we communicate. Here's how we're going to run things. Here's how we're going to play. That's what non-conference play is about. And that's a great time for Mike Woodson and the staff to come together and be like, all right, how are we running this team this year? What are we going to do? What's our mindset? What's our identity? How can we put all these puzzle pieces that we just brought in? How can we put them together and make this the best team possible? Those are going to be things that have to happen with 5 new transfer players, 3 of them being starters now on this team. And not to mention, you've got a 6th-year guy that's been a big-time role player and a starter on this team and an impact player in Trey Galloway that's now coming off the bench. You have to find ways to implement all of them, because you don't want to bring them in, a guy like Hatton or Goode, and not play them as much as they need or as much as they want. That's a battle you got to fight too, man. And it's difficult, but In terms of Hatton, he's got the size, he's got the skill set, and for the Hoosiers, you just add another body. And I think you are excited about this. I think the fans are excited about this. And now you look at it and it's like, okay, maybe another guard. That's the question now. Are the Hoosiers done? Maybe another guard, but this was the big man you were looking for. This was the size that the Hoosiers had to go and get in the portal. And I think now, I just don't know if the Hoosiers are going to bring anybody else in. And again, I've told you this. I don't know if they're overly concerned about it. I don't know if they are just over the top, have to go get that final spot. I think they're okay. I really do think they're settled and they're content. That's the word. They are content with what they've got. And how could you not be? We're going to look at the roster in just a minute. It's really good. It's competitive. It's one that I think can win the Big Ten. I think it's that solid. And this portal cycle has been crushed by Mike Woodson, his entire coaching staff. They have crushed the transfer portal. They've done everything they were supposed to do. They went out and got big names, made splashes in the portal, and they did the most important thing was they filled their needs. They filled the needs that this team and this roster had to have. You needed 2 better guards. Boom, you got them. You went and got a starting 5 because yours just went to the NBA. Boom, you got him. You needed depth in the front court. Bam, you went and got 2 of them. You got everything you needed coming out of the offseason after everybody left, after all the transfers dipped out, after your people graduated, and after Khalil Ware went to the NBA draft. You had to go and find at least 4 pieces, and the Hoosiers have found 5 with 2 stellar guards that will start on this team, with a starting 5 that's going to be one of the best, if not the best centers in the entire Big Ten, and 2 players in Luke Goode and Langdon Hatton that can come in and be a superstar at any time. This is a competitive roster, and Mike Woodson and the Hoosiers and his entire staff need to be applauded and need to be praised for what they did in this offseason, in this portal cycle. Now it's time for it to all come together. Now it's time to coach them and train them and teach them and have all this come together for a really good season for Indiana. Well, coming up on Locked On Hoosiers, I'm talking about this roster a lot because I believe in it. We're going to break it down. What does the addition of Hatton do to this team, and how is this all going to mold together, and what different, rotations could we see coming up this fall, winter, and spring for Indiana basketball? That's coming up next on Locked On Hoosiers. Final segment here on Locked On Hoosiers. Appreciate you being here, making this your go-to spot for all things Indiana athletics and making it your first listen each and every day. The Indiana Hoosiers, after adding Langdon Hatton, have a pretty good-looking roster now in terms of what they've brought in, what they lost, and what they are going to have at the start of the season. And so here are your transfers, okay? You bring in Oumar Ballo, the 7-footer from Arizona, your starting center. You bring in Kanaan Carlyle, the 6'3" guard from Stanford, who will be your starting 2. You bring in Luke Goode, who is a forward at 6'7" from Illinois. He'll be a backup 4, could be a backup 3 if you needed it, right? He can kind of play a little flex. Langdon Hatton, the new one from Bellarmine, who is going to be a 4-5, kind of floating around in there as a backup at 6'10". And Myles Rice, the Washington State point guard at 6'2", who is going to come in and be your starter. Here's the thing about Langdon Hatton. He's one of those one-year rentals. He's in there with Oumar Ballo, and he's in there with Luke Goode. You're going to have them from 1 year here in Bloomington, and then they're gone. They have no more eligibility left. Good news is, with Kanaan Carlyle and Myles Rice, they have 3 years of eligibility remaining here at Indiana. So as long as you treat them well, and as long as it's going well and both parties are happy, you could have them for the next 2 to 3 seasons, which is a huge advantage today in college athletics, college basketball for sure. But man, people don't stay in one place very often, in case you haven't noticed. We're talking about 5 people that left their former school to come to our school. Yeah, people move around left and right every single day in the transfer portal. But I think people are getting hung up at times of, oh, he's only here for 1 year, blah, blah, blah. Who cares? They decided to come here, and I think people are having that discussion about Langdon Hatton right now, and it's like, why are we talking about that? Who cares? He decided to come to Indiana. He wants to be a part of a competitive team, and he wants to play for a hometown school, for his state school, for the program in the state of Indiana. He wants to be here, and the Hoosiers have a role for him and will find a way to use him. Oumar Ballo, I get that. He's your starting center, and people wanted Indiana to go after somebody who would be here long-term. But again, that's just hard to find, man. That's really hard to find nowadays. But what does excite me is Carlyle and Rice could be here. They have 3 years of eligibility, so we'll see how that goes. Your starters in order, and I don't think there's an argument here, is Myles Rice, is Kanaan Carlyle, Mackenzie Mbako coming back, Malik Renew coming back, and then Oumar Ballo. Trey Galloway is probably your sixth man coming off as a guard, but that's where it gets tricky because you want him and expect him to be the sixth man, that first guy off the bench. He's earned that as a super senior here in Bloomington, but what if it's not Myles Rice or Kanaan Carlyle that comes off the floor first? What if it's Oumar Ballo? What if it's Malik Renew? Heck, what if it's Mackenzie Mbako? What if one of those guys is the first one that needs to come off the floor each game? Trey Galloway ain't going in to play the five, ladies and gentlemen. He will wait until a guard comes off the floor. So in that sixth man role, and I put that in air quotes for those of you on audio because I think we get hung up on that sometimes too. It's like, oh, he's the first one off the bench, sixth man of the year. Like, yes, but no, because you put the guys on the floor based off the ones that you're taking off. Like, it doesn't matter. In this scenario for Indiana, they are not going to say, man, Trey Galloway, we appreciate your time, man. And you know what? You're coming off the bench first. No doubt, no matter what, you're the first one off. No, you do it based off of what sub that you need to make. And there's a greater chance that a big man needs to come out earlier than it is for a guard. I look at Oumar Ballo. I look at Malik Renew. If they need a rest, and maybe that's part of the game plan, right? All right, we're going to play Ballo for the first 7 or 8 minutes. We're going to pull him for the next 4 or 5, get him some rest, and then put him back in. Well, that's a Langdon Hatton situation. That's where he comes in. So I don't want us to get caught up on how the defense, or I guess how the bench rotation works just yet, because we don't really know what that's going to look like. But you do have Trey Galloway, you have Luke Goode, and you have Langdon Hatton. And I think with those guys, you can pick and choose where you want to put them. Galloway can run the point if he has to. I think Carlyle can run the point if he has to. And then you start talking Luke Goode and Langdon Hatton. I talked about this earlier. They're kind of your flex guys. They can kind of go wherever you want them to go. And they can make it happen for the limited amount of time that they're going to be on the floor. Just depends on what that's going to look like. And with everything you have, plus, I keep forgetting Bryson Tucker because he's a high school recruit. You've got Bryson Tucker in there as well. So you can't tell me that this team doesn't have depth and doesn't have everything they need to be successful. I refuse to believe it at this point. And it's crazy because I thought that about last year's roster until I'm comparing it to this year's roster, and it was depleted last year. Outside the starting five, the healthy starting five of Xavier Johnson, Trey Galloway, Mackenzie Mbako, Malik Renew, and Khalil Ware. That's a solid starting five. And then the drop-off happened pretty much as soon as you go to the bench. That's not an issue now. That's not a problem. And at some point, there are no more excuses in terms of talent or anything like that. If injuries happen, that's one thing. But even if that does, as I've said, you have guys to step in that you can be competitive with, and not having depth isn't an excuse anymore. This roster is going to be one of the best in the Big Ten. They're already a preseason top 25, top 20 team, no matter where you look. They're already getting people picking them to win the Big Ten, and I'm talking about us, the Indiana Hoosiers. You've gone out and done the work in the portal. If you're Mike Woodson and this staff, you've done what you needed to do in the offseason. Congratulations. You bring in Bryson Tucker, you bring in all these transfer portal guys, and you were able to salvage Malik Renew, Mackenzie Mbako, and Trey Galloway. What else could you ask for? What else do you want if you're Mike Woodson? The roster's there. We don't know what the schedule looks like. I think the opponents are good. We've talked about that, how if it all stacks up, this could be a really fun year for Indiana basketball. No more excuses. This roster is good. It's really good. And now it's time to start winning. Well, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers. Appreciate you being here again, making this truly your first listen each and every day. If it's not, add it to your rotation. Be a part of it and come in and be a part of this wonderful family. Like the video on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel as we make a push towards 3,000 subscribers. And all of you on audio, follow us on there. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode of Locked On Hoosiers. We'll have one more episode for the week coming up on Friday. So until then, stay safe, and I'll talk to you later.